It's a ritual that every Charlestonian loves. Piccolo and Spoleto are back on May 26th. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with both Nigel Redden of Spoleto and Scott Watson of Piccolo Spoleto. So today is May 18th, 2017, and from what I understand, it's 8 days before the Piccolo and Spoleto festivals.
Indeed, it's very close. We're getting ready and the countdown is going on.
Tell me, what is going through your mind right now?
Well, through my mind, I'm just hoping that all the rehearsals finish, that the weather stays as beautiful as it is right now, that audiences come in large number, and that people have a wonderful time.
Scott, you've been here for what, 5 years now?
This will be my 5th festival full-time on the ground, and I would share Nigel's interest in the weather. I'm yet to worry or fret about it because, as we know, it's beyond our control. But right now, I think probably the big difference that we face institutionally is while they're focused on rehearsals and shows coming together, we're still actually trying to make more magic happen. We're planning last-minute details, new additions, a few unanticipated changes that are inevitable with the event schedule that has over 500 different events. But we're just hopeful that come next Friday, starting at 12 noon down at City Hall, we set into motion 17 days and nights that are for the ages.
Nigel, let me go to you for a second because I walk past this almost every day when I'm going to and from my house on Charleston Seaside. And I keep going back to thinking about that house on the corner of Reed and America and that billboard. And I know it has so much significance for Spoleto back in 1991. When you look back to 1991 to right now, what is the biggest thing that sticks out in your mind?
Well, I must say that 1991, that David Hammond's project was really very significant, and it was difficult to make happen, and we wouldn't have been able to make it happen without the city's collaboration, and it still wouldn't be there. It wouldn't still be existing there if it weren't for the city. And the city made this, the park in which that billboard sits, and acquired the lot on which the house sits. And I think that it's a kind of a wonderful tribute to David Hammond's that the piece still exists, because it's provocative in some ways. I mean, I don't know whether the Ishmael Reed quote is still on it. I mean, it came off because the house was being repainted, and I haven't seen it put back on again. But it's a provocative quote, and I could see in other cities or in other parts of cities that it could be, someone could trash the place, and it's been kept up very nicely. And I also think that it's a kind of a wonderful precursor for the International African American Museum, because David Hammond is one of the great African American artists who's doing work now. His work is complicated, it's challenging, it's chameleon-like, it's not always the same. But it's, I think, a wonderful tribute to Charleston that it's there, that he created it for that neighborhood, and that the neighborhood has embraced it.
And a personal note, I'm actually on that billboard. We took that photo.
Oh, that's you?
That's
you?
That's me.
You were, I mean, how old were you then?
You were in 81, I was born in 84, somewhere like 3 or 4 years, 5 years old, something like that, 6, 7.
I mean, I've got the original photograph in my, it's in a drawer there, so that we can make a new poster. But that's so great.
Yes,
and you know what? I mean, there you are looking, I mean, I assume you were told to look up, you didn't know what you were looking at. But there you are looking at that flag.
Right.
And I think that it's such a symbol of hope, and such a symbol for the future. And clearly things worked out for you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And thanks to Al also, too.
Oh, he was a remarkable, I mean, he is a remarkable man.
Yeah.
I haven't seen him in a while, but I don't know if you know the story about this, Scott, but David wanted to do a piece in that neighborhood, which is the east side, and I mean, the Spoleto crew is, let's say, not all made up of African Americans, and David said, if you bring your crew in here and you've got a bunch of white people coming in, it's going to have nothing to do with the neighborhood. It's going to be irrelevant for the neighborhood. And so David was sort of hanging out in that neighborhood and got to meet Al, and Al agreed to basically build it. I mean, we paid him to build it, but I mean, he adopted it in a way that was wonderfully, I don't know, it was a wonderful tribute to the neighborhood in the sense that he brought a lot to the table. He suggested things to David, David followed. And he has been the godfather of that piece ever since.
He is a steward not only of the artwork, but for the neighborhood. And there's such prominent figures in the community. I have no problem when Al calls and lets me know that some materials are needed, or we've even sent up, there was a filming for tiny house hunting, and so we sent the crew by to film
Oh, great.
the House of the Future. Unfortunately, it was raining, and Al went on a little bit too long for soundbite television, so it wound up on the editing room floor. But we just hearing Al talk about it is a life-enriching experience.
We spent a lot of time talking for that festival, because it became, that piece, some of the other pieces were controversial, and but it was a wonderful way of marrying the festival with the city in a way that it hadn't been sort of joined before, and we've, I think, explored other ways of having the city and the festival interact. Clearly Piccolo interacts with the city. Well, you are the city. You are the city, so you interact with the city all the time. But our events are in theaters for the most part. Many of your events are outside, and so available to people, and so visible to people, and ours don't always connect in that way. And I think that was a wonderful way to start, and we've traveled along that road in various ways ever since.
And you keep talking about the partnership between you and the city and the Piccolo Spoleto Festival. Define that relationship right now.
Do you want to start, or shall I?
I'd let you take the lead, and
Okay.
I'll do the best to fill in.
Okay.
It started in the second year or the third year of Spoleto Festival USA. Spoleto Festival USA had done an outreach festival in the second year, which was reasonably successful. But I would say, I'm sounding a bit dubious about the success. And one of the problems was that the kind of sensibility that you need to put on an opera or to put on a play, and where you're focusing on a particular event that you're shaping, and you're spending all this time shaping that event, means that you can't focus on the 500 events or 700 events. The number seems to vary, but it's always very, very high. And so it was so much better that another entity, another sensibility take it over, and that was Ellen Dressler-Morrill, who I think started it in 1979. And I think she did a terrific job. And also what happens is the city Commissioner of Cultural Affairs is always working with arts groups in the city, knows the arts groups in the city better than I would, and so can rally them around and encourage them to participate in ways that make sense for them during the festival, and also find audiences that aren't necessarily going to want to pay the prices that we charge for tickets, not necessarily going to want to spend 2 hours inside a theater, and they want a different kind of entertainment. Sometimes they're children, and sometimes they are in hospitals, and sometimes they're just in neighborhoods.
I think that accessibility and ease of access really is paramount to Piccolo Spoleto's longevity, but also to how we complement Spoleto Festival USA. That there's no question the model of a sister festival, an off festival, a fringe festival, it's been pretty well documented in the European model, and often happens in more contemporary festivals. And I think Nigel's absolutely right, that the key is the local arts community is going to want to be attendant to the main stage festival. But if you have just a buckshot approach to there's some poetry readings in art galleries, or there's an open studios day for the visual arts, or there's a choral competition, it kind of falls flat. But by having the city step in and say, we are going to organize something, and we're going to use very much a big tent approach, where it's almost as if you need to be salacious or overly provocative to be excluded, that our curatorial approach is much more, is there a consistent level of achievement? So it can be amateur, it could be a community choral group, but we just need to know how to market it and how to present it. It could be a youth performer. Or it could be the youth orchestra, or it could be a 14-year-old prodigy like Caleb Bork who will perform at the music hall.
Yeah.
And on up to, it could be a professional producing theater company based locally. It could be somebody regionally or even nationally that we think would offer interesting counterpoint to the local community. And then, of course, for the big public assembly, the symphony performing at the Custom House on our opening night, the finale that we have on Saturday at the closing weekend at Hampton Park. That's where we want a little bit more, something you wouldn't see every other day in Charleston. And I try to use that as a framework for anything we consider. But the other part of it is we rely, it's not just that Mayor Riley and my predecessor had a vision. They had an army of volunteers. Not volunteers who want to take tickets and who want to be at the festival or be a human arrow and wear a t-shirt. They had volunteers who wanted to work around the year, planning, saying, you know, if we could just get the organ restored at the Citadel, we'd have a phenomenal additional venue for our organo organ recital series. Well, guess what? Come out there on the 27th of May and hear David Friddle perform with two of the strings players from the CSO, and you'll have a performance that we know is equivalent to anything you can see on the world stage. And that is based solidly here in Charleston with artists from the Lowcountry. So we're never trying to go in a 15-round mano a mano, let's suck it out with Spoleto. We're trying to come up with what's 40 to 50 minutes that would complement your day of enjoying the arts and enjoying Charleston. And then the other part which Nigel touched on is we view one of our mission points as the city is the stage. How can we help you find that hidden little treasure that you may not know? If you're a tourist, what's the likelihood that, unless you're on a walking tour, that you're going to go into the Huguenot Church or First Scots or St. Philip's? You know, you may worship on Sunday in a certain church, but to come in and hear Baroque music at St. Philip's, or to hear a choir sing at Trinity UMC on Meeting Street, these are opportunities that really showcase what makes Charleston special. Then you have something like a poetry reading in the Dock Street Courtyard, just before Spoleto has their evening curtain. And it really is magical. And I think that's what people have come to expect. It could be anything from face painting and kids banging on an instrument for the first time out at Marion Square. It could be dancing to reggae or, this year kind of a Creole rock band that I'm calling the New Orleans version of the Arcade Fire, the finale. The sense of discovery, the unexpected, those are the things that we think are the perfect complement to the main stage work that goes into the formality of opera presentation, of the well-made play in a beautifully restored theater, or chamber music, set perfectly. We're trying to give people an opportunity to step a little bit outside their comfort zone and feel rewarded for it. And we're also trying to make sure that the visitor to our community and the local alike support our local artists. Mm-hmm. So if you're out at Marion Square and the art exhibition is on view, take home a painting. Don't be shy about spending money. Buy a ticket to see a Piccolo Fringe show at Theater 99. That's all money that stays here locally in our economy. And a large number of our artists really hope that that last weekend in May, going into the front end of June, will let them close their June 30th fiscal year on a good note.
Now, Nigel, let me take you to a headline that I believe was in the City Paper earlier today. It says this quote: Spoleto brings big screen film project, Slow Dancing to Marion Square. I'm wondering, why Marion Square, why now?
Well, last year we did, in conjunction with Piccolo Spoleto, we did a simulcast of Porgy and Bess.
Yes.
And the reason for doing the simulcast was the production sold out quickly, and we wanted to make sure that people in the community who wanted to see it could see it. Unfortunately, it rained on that night in Marion Square. Nonetheless, people came out and sat through the rain. But it was a thank you to Charleston from Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo was a major supporter of our production of Porgy and Bess, and they wanted to make this available to people in Charleston. And I was having lunch with a board member who works at Wells Fargo, and he said, it would be nice to do another kind of thank you to the community from Wells Fargo. And I said, well, let's talk about it. And Scott and I chatted about various possibilities, and the possibility that seemed best to me, and fortunately Scott agreed, was to do slow dancing, which could be available throughout the festival from beginning to end. So if, God forbid, there's a downpour on Thursday the 24th, which is when it opens, it'll be available on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, all the way through to the end of the festival in June. June 12th is when we're actually taking it down. The piece itself is actually a mesmerizing series of images that are projected on screens that are 30 feet wide and 50 feet tall. So they're huge images. And each involves a single dancer who has been photographed in very, very high resolution, doing a 5-second solo. And the 5-second solo is then slowed down to take 10 minutes to watch. And so that a gesture that seems like that can all of a sudden, it seems as if it's defying gravity. And many of the dancers are leaping, and so that they are rising into the air with a kind of majesty that is difficult to describe, but something that is absolutely essential to see. And there are 42 dancers, 42 films all in, and they're shown in random sequence, so that you will see 3 different dancers at any one time, and they, one might be beginning and another one's ending, and you'll see the middle of the third one. And the juxtaposition is not always the same. So there might be a ballet dancer here, there's someone voguing there, there's a dancer who's from Taiwan who's doing a kind of kunshu dance, then there's someone from the Philippines who's doing something else, and then a lot of American modern dancers. But I think there's something just plain beautiful about it. It'll be on starting at about 9 o'clock every night, because we have to wait till dark, obviously, because it's a screen, and on until about 11 o'clock every night. So I really want people to come down and feel that they're part of the festival, whether they are going into the Gilliard, whether they're going into Dock Street, whether they're going into the Cecilia. We're just hanging out in Marion Square.
Yeah, it's absolutely exciting because we don't have the Performing Arts Center out by the Clover Leaf off the highway. We have our deconstructed Performing Arts Center, some components, the Gilliard here on George Street. And then you kind of would love to have that view from above to see how people are making their different pathways, whether it's to the Cistern for a perfect night of jazz over outside of Randolph Hall, or up to the Charleston Music Hall for a Piccolo Spoleto concert. We're even doing something at the Best Friend Train Museum this year, where we'll have the V-Tones of Charleston playing music for little conductors one Saturday morning. And we're kind of taking a reference from the Johnny Cash songbook that we know they'll be able to come up with some fun songs that everybody can sing along to. But so when you put right in Charleston's great meeting space, Marion Square, this very assertive but elegant presentation of the arts. The dance is one of the most immediate and recognizable art forms, certainly one of the longest standing art forms, and yet it often exists in this rarefied air. So I think that putting that juxtaposition of the finest talents in the dance community, one Titan lost, Trisha Brown, there in this oversized, exaggerated, attenuated mode, it's more than just window dressing. It is putting the arts stridently right in the heart of the community, and I started to think about it, that what better format than to have local artists, local and regional artists, almost 100 of them, out vending their original artwork in the heat of the day, during the farmers market, animated with not just fresh produce, but artisans and craftspeople on the weekends, Sunday farmers market hours for the first 2 weekends of the festival, performances, our family day, that then goes to sleep with this silent video installation that keeps the art going as passerbys, find their way back to their hotel or for a nightcap to talk about what they've seen in the theater.
The Charleston City Piccolo, a headline on April 24th said this, quote, Piccolo Spoleto is a month away. Here's what we most are excited about. Obviously, we're 8 days away. But what events are you personally excited about?
Well, for me, I mean, it's always the festival as a whole. I mean, the operas that we're doing, and I always begin with the operas because they've been in rehearsal for quite some time. I was over at one of the rehearsals earlier on today. I was at rehearsals yesterday. And the wonder of the festival for me is that we find these casts that are made up of quite young singers. And in this case, Jemez McCorkle, who was singing Lenski and Eugene Onegin, graduated from the Curtis Institute on May the 13th. And he was not in Philadelphia on May the 13th, he was rehearsing here. And so he celebrated his graduation from music school by singing this extraordinary aria. And this beautiful, beautiful opera that is, I think the design of it, the design of the production is, the Gilliard stage is filled with birch trees, which are very Russian. It's a wonderful production. In the Dock Street where we have Farnace, which is a Vivaldi opera, and I think most of us know Vivaldi from the Four Seasons or relatively few pieces like that, but we don't know his operas, and he was a major opera composer, and this is an opera composed in the early part of the 18th century in kind of a juxtaposition with Quartet, which is the opera that was written in the 21st century that we're doing in Memento Auditorium. And then next week, on Monday, the performers for Waiting for Godot arrive. They are going to do this Samuel Beckett classic in the Dock Street, and I think that's going to be very exciting. But we also have a lot of dance this year, which will complement the slow dancing. On opening weekend, we have Maria Paez, who's one of the great flamenco dancers. We're bringing a number of companies, 2 companies from Israel, Lev and Hillel Kogan. We have a company, one of the exciting young performers, and I think this is sold out, so I shouldn't mention it too much. But Ayadeli Cassell, I don't know whether you know her name, but she will be a name that you will know eventually. She's this extraordinary tap dancer. She was a protege of Sabian Glover, and well, things changed, and she sort of went into hiding for a bit, and I saw her do a short excerpt of a dance and encouraged her to create a full evening program. So we're going to see the premiere of that full evening program, and she's just an amazing dancer. Yeah. So I really think that's going to be very special, which is in the Wall Street Playhouse.
Oh, yeah.
So, which always has interesting things going on. I could go on and on, and I'll try not to, but I mean, it's a very full festival, and I'm very excited about it.
And I was just looking at the Piccolo Spoleto Festival program guide here, Scott, and I was wondering if I were to flip through that, what page should I stop on as far as events?
You should probably start right in the middle of the book, where the daily schedule.
Yes.
Because people always say, what's good, who's coming, what should I see? The honest truth is you should see what's next. Because wherever you are in the run of the 17 days, our opportunities don't repeat. We have a few shows where they'll run for 4 or 5 performances of the theater show, or an illusionist might have a longer run because their venue is unique to them. But when it comes to one of our chamber music concerts on the Spotlight Concert Series, or our early music series at St. Philip's Church, that program, you pretty much get one shot to see it. So if it speaks to you, walk up and buy a ticket. If you see something in a couple of days, circle out the time in your planner and make that commitment that you're going to go and bring a friend. But by the same token, a big part of what we do are those projects that are just out in the public name. So whether it's the art exhibition at Marion Square, the juried art exhibition at the City Gallery, there are plenty of things that you really don't have to have too much of a plan. Just pick up the book and we'll point you in the right direction. More importantly, what I always tell people is ask a local. If you're out at Marion Square, ask one of the artists what they'd recommend you see. Ask our box office staff at the Gilliard, or even ask the Spoleto staff what's good at Piccolo Spoleto. Because people love to share their stories about Charleston. And almost everybody has a story about their role in the festivals, whether it's being in an art installation, or whether it's my wife talking about being in the Queen of Spades, or whether it's someone who was on the Piccolo Spoleto Rising Stars program as a child, and now is performing in a chamber music program, or is a featured soloist. The things that I'm most excited about, I love renewing and refreshing the programs that have been there since 1979, the craft show, the outdoor art show, sundown poetry readings, but I always want to try something new. So, whether it's trying to showcase the Best Friend Train with a fun concert, or whether it's going out off the peninsula, we'll be up at Nexton in Somerville with a great program. Gil Landry, who I believe was with Old Crow Medicine Show when they played at the Cistern, he'll be with the quartet out as the headliner, and this really unique opening act, the Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band, where you can look online and see where he plays John Henry on 18 different instruments, from a cigar box guitar to a guitar made out of an axe to a guitar made out of a shotgun, and this little amped up trio that we're sure for Somerville people are going to be talking about what they saw out at Brown Family Park. To being out in West Ashley on our opening weekend, Ashley River Baptist Church will host for our Festival of Churches and Synagogues a concert by a statewide choral group of over 100 talented voices from Baptist churches across the state. So to be able to do that without even coming downtown, that complements the fun of what we do at the West Ashley Farmers Market, what we do in neighborhood parks. We'll do our Let's Get Jazzy in the Park program at the Housing Authority on Meeting Street. So we really want to make sure that it's easy for people to find the art. We want, in terms of the book, we want it to be easy to navigate the festival. It may be 700 events. I stopped counting after 500 because what's the difference to the layperson?
Right.
But it's incumbent on us as the producers and the organizers that if somebody told you a little bit about something, they're already trying to figure out, are they talking about Spoleto or are they talking about Piccolo Spoleto? So we need to facilitate that process, and I hope that as people read the book, they'll realize we're not belaboring the point when we say a string quartet, violin, viola, cello. We're trying to help you understand the artist and get to know their name.
Right.
Because somebody may have said you really need to go and see whomever performed. Well, if their name doesn't appear in the materials, you're going to have a very hard time finding a way to our box office. So again, it's a lot of fun. That's our primary point. It's a lot of engagement. It is at work in the schools. We'll have school groups over at the library 8 days of the festival. And when you see the kids come marching in from Hughes and Sanders Clyde, and they sit down to the Three Little Pigs by College Chamber Opera, College of Charleston Opera, it really fills your heart with joy. The same way that going out to Mepkin Abbey to hear the Ensemble of St. Clair do a perfect concert on Memorial Day is transformative. And so, I hate to use, broad things like there's something for everyone, but there always will be something for everyone in the arts and the cultural offering. And so we're trying very hard to give it shape and form. And I always say that, we basically provide the armature upon which this beautiful sculpture can be detailed by the artist. And that infrastructure, that backbone, it's a lot of work. We hope it seems seamless to the general public. And it's not just our staff.
Okay.
It's city staff across the Parks Department, Police Department, Traffic and Transportation. We move a huge amount of personnel into effect to support the festivals collectively. And then when you look at the interns, the volunteers, which is the same with the apprentices and people that are helping out at Spoleto, you realize that you almost wonder how can there be any locals to go and see the shows, because it seems like everybody's working on the festivals.
You're right about that. Well, quickly, write the headline for me. Spoleto and Piccolo will be what this year?
Fabulous.
I think that Piccolo is going to be unexpected. And I think that Spoleto will be sublime. Flipping through the program, having moved down here from New York, it is Christmas morning when you get, well, it is about Christmas morning when you get to Berkshire.
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
shortly thereafter, but it's this wealth of possibility and these beautiful, elegant productions and, the best the world has to offer brought right here to Charleston. And I think that, you can only kind of see the connections once you're in it or as it's unfolding.
Yes.
So part of the fun of the festival is the points of intersection and overlap that you weren't prepared for. But it's also that sense too of, I think one of the hallmarks that I notice with Spoleto is it's often a homecoming for artists. And for a personal and to me, to see Waiting for Godot, not the Gate Theaters, what was considered authoritative production with Stephen Brennan and now
Right.
Stanford, who'd be no strangers to
Right.
Spoleto audiences, and Johnny Murphy during the Governor. But instead to see Druid, who came in 2011 with Cripple Finishman.
Right.
Some of the ensemble carrying over from that, I believe, with
Well, Aaron Monahan is, yes.
but the director Gary Hines, who's also director for Fanace,
Yes.
with David Bolger, an Irish choreographer. These are familiar faces, and they love Charleston because the first time they're here, they're smitten, or they've heard about it from their colleagues elsewhere. And
No, exactly. Now, when I was in Ireland talking to the cast, I mean, they, a number of them had not been here before, and they knew about Charleston vividly because so many actors from Ireland have come. But it was interesting that you talked about that definitive Gate Theatre production 20 years ago, or 21 years ago. I mean, it was an extraordinary production. But this production, this production, has also been recognized as a definitive production in a different way. And I think, this is for a new generation.
the notices for it and the awards it's been claiming from the Irish Theatre Awards on, it's extraordinary. It also, part of what I wish is that I had a little bit more flexibility in my schedule because this production has also been done in the Irish countryside,
Yes.
on air. And but I think that once everybody sees the production concept, the design work, and most importantly, the acting of the ensemble, it's one of my favorite pieces of theater. I haven't seen a live production of it since
Right.
Gate was on tour and I saw it in Berkeley.
Now, I must say that production, I mean, that it is a piece of theatre that is extraordinarily important. I mean, it is one of the major plays of the 20th century, if not, one could argue which one the most important play of the 20th century is, but it's certainly one of the most important plays, and transformative plays. And to hear it with an Irish accent makes it more poetic than with an American accent. I mean, I don't know quite why, but in Ireland, in America we say Godot, and in Ireland they say Godot. And I mean, that's just, but it's somehow, as you hear the cadence
Right.
with an Irish accent, it all of a sudden makes conversational sense in a way that it doesn't with an American accent. So I think if one has any interest in seeing a Samuel Beckett play performed absolutely as it should be, I mean, this Waiting for Godot will be something you can't miss.
And the reviews all point out the comedy and hilarity
Right.
of what's in the actual text. So, again, it's those opportunities where you're anticipating, not just because it's significant or prestigious or well developed, you're anticipating it because you have a familiarity and a bond already with the companies or with the stylistic art forms. I think that there'll be a lot of discovery around the dance program Spoleto this year. And that's great because we desperately need to build our local audience's understanding of contemporary dance. That's the only way the Gilliard can be successful year-round. And that's the only way that dance locally will evolve into a more vibrant community. And I think you can apply the same sense to almost any of the disciplines.
Yes.
That we are given this gift of artistic riches by means of Spoleto Festival USA that we then hope has a lasting and pervasive impact on what expectation is and really the cultural literacy and confidence that our audiences have. that there's a lot to be said both for artists and audiences about creative risk-taking. If you just do what you know and you're safe with, you'll just kind of go into a very comfortable place of security. But if you continue to push and find new avenues, your artwork evolves in ways that you didn't know would be possible. And as an audience member, your expectation and your awareness and your appreciation, I think, becomes all the more rich.
Well, Nigel Redden and Scott Watson, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Quintin.
Thank you.
Always great to see you.
Thank you.